I'm Christina from the Dragonboat team, and today we have Becky Flint, Dragonboat's very own CEO, joining us, as well as Rina Alexin, the CEO of 280 Group. We've got a really exciting conversation teed up today. So before we officially begin, just a quick word on Dragonboat. Dragonboat helps enables product leaders to accelerate their outcomes with a suite of products for outcome-focused road mapping and delivery. So check out dragonboat.io/CPO if you want to learn more. And then next slide. I'm going to hand this over to Becky to kickstart the conversation and to officially introduce Rina, our guest speaker for today. So I'll let you take it from here, Becky.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and Happy New Year. My name is Becky Flint. I'm the founder CEO of Dragonboat, and with a great pleasure, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Rina. Rina is the CEO of the 280 Group, which is a leading product education provider, and a number more. And obviously, I'll leave it to you, Rina, to share more. And Rina has extensive experience, as you can see, in strategy, product leadership at many amazing companies throughout the world. And Rina joined 280 Group, and with a focus in bringing transformation changes to organization and arming product people with the right tools and skills to do great product management. So very on point on our discussion today. So welcome, Rina.
Hi, Becky. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our discussion today. And a bit more to share about 280 Group, and I think that's really going to help shape our discussion. 280 Group, yes, we're an education provider, but what we really are is a little different. We believe that product management teams, in order for them to become truly effective, we need to take care of not just skills, we also take care of process and culture. And at the head of any company's product leadership is the CPO. So the person who is required and has the mandate of making sure that their teams have the ultimate chance of success, the CPO has to have the skills and knowledge to make sure that their teams are empowered and are operating in the context of an organization that understands and values product management. And so that's why I'm really excited about our conversation here today.
Right. Well, thanks so much for the context, Rina. And, we had a brief check yesterday. And just for everyone joining us today, we typically have our webinars in a couple of different formats. In today's format, it's actually a lot more conversational. As you see, the topic is quite broad around how CEO and a CPO can work together. And we're going to cover a bunch of topics, broad stroke, in terms of themes. One of the themes is about leadership. And then we talk about the outcomes, and we talk about how we deliver products that drive outcome, and then also think about how we can help the teams motivated and just business needs at the same time. So these are the four broad themes, and maybe we can start with this to talk a little bit about CEO and the CPO. I think I think both of us are seeing a lot of similar stories. There talks about, do you need a CPO? Do you not need a CPO? Is the CEO the CPO? So let's get that conversation started.
Yeah, I've heard it a number of different ways in smaller companies, especially when we're talking about startups where the founder really should be the CPO. The CEO is the CPO, and there's a really a good reason for it. In earlier stage companies and startups and smaller companies, the product team needs to know, they need that ultimate backing of where are we going, what is the vision, and that is really owned by the founder. So in those companies, there probably isn't a need for there to be also CPO. That additional coordination doesn't make sense. And then again, getting everybody excited for the long-term vision of the company, that's really the founder and the CEO's mantle. But when we come to organizations that are much larger, they're scaling up, the CEO is responsible, again, still for that vision, but they need to what does that vision mean for a product portfolio across it's more than a full-time job at that point. So once we become more complicated, usually there needs to be a really strong CPO, but the CEO's backing still needs to be there. So even in organizations where there are two people doing that job, it's still like that relationship is probably the most important relationship in the business.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think, there's definitely quite a bit of conversation recently, right? From Brian Chesky talking about, no, he's the CPO versus, to be honest, to think about the job of the CPO and the CEO at a certain scale, it's just very difficult for one person to take on. So I really like you talk a little bit about how the delineation of a vision strategy, and then you go to sort of the product vision and strategy. So maybe we double click on a little bit on how that goes, because there is a transition point where you start to say, hey, as a CEO, it's a time for me to hire a CPO. And then after a little bit, then it will be, okay, so now I have a CPO. How would this a CPO work with a CEO? Because definitely there's an intricate moment you see companies go through that transition well, but there are also quite a large number of the companies not doing so well in that transition. So what you've seen, and I like to share some of the experience that we've seen as well. Let's compare notes, see how it goes.
Yeah. Sure. So where I think as CEO, some signals that you probably need a CPO, it's where the requirements of your day-to-day are no longer in terms of what is the future of the product portfolio look like. So there are different kinds, by the way, there's different kinds of CEOs out there. There's different kinds of CPOs, and there are different kinds of also COOs for that reason. But if your mandate in terms of how you're going to be growing your business, for example, is through inorganic growth, which is on the mantle of the CEO, they're no longer going to be the right person to manage the product portfolio. So it's different story for different organizations. And what we see, I can tell you when it doesn't work. And that is usually when the CEO is completely, how do I put this? When they are not mindful that once you have a CPO, it's no longer the strongest voice in the room, right? The CPO has a mandate of figuring out where is the company going to be with the CEO, where is the company going to go to over the long term? And they need to care about long-term interests of the business, whereas everybody else that is on the team is working for the here and now. And as a result, the here and now becomes a very strong voice. And when the CEO is no longer the voice of the long term, and this is why we need to be doing and investing resources and time and attention on the things that will get us to where we want to go, that is when there's like a break in that relationship. So that is what we're seeing in terms of, okay, you need one when it's much more complex, when the CEO's job is no longer just managing one product, there's a portfolio happening, it's a lot more complex. There are decisions that need to be made in terms of prioritization on the CEO's time away from current product portfolio. They need a CPO. They need somebody that's trusted, that is going to be a voice around where do we need to go in the future from a product portfolio standpoint. But then the CEO still has to echo they have to be aligned, they have to be in lockstep, because the rest of the department heads are going to be focused on a very different problem to be solved, which is where's the company going this quarter? Like, where are sales teams getting their commissions this quarter is an actual problem that like a sales leader needs to be focused on. It's very different from the product. How about you, Becky?
Yeah, I think you call out quite a few very interesting phase. And I actually went through one of I was lucky enough to work with a couple of companies didn't have a CPO, and sometimes they didn't even have a product team. And as they grow and they realize, okay, we actually need a product instead of just selling the next solution, right? So when you try to productize, then you have a product, and then you realize, okay, what do I do next? And that's very similar to what you said, which is, and in the earlier stage of the company, there's a lot of focus on now because the company is in a survival mode, right? You have an established foundation and they survive. And then as company go to the next phase, then it will be, you have to look at it today and also look at it tomorrow. Because if you don't look at it tomorrow, your competition, your customer, and everything else is just going to shift away. So that graduation is so slow that you don't realize until it's too late. That's a lot of times the companies kind of happen to that. So companies don't have a CPO. A lot of times it will have that sort of unfortunate fate of, the cooking the frog in some ways, and then it's getting too late. So I think in the similarities is really there. And that also put a CPO actually in a pretty strong pressure in the way that you have to think about the future and you have to still support today. Right. So I think you brought out a couple of terms, and I really want to double click on that as well, because that's the things that we also work with CPOs, our customers, to say, how do we educate the concept of portfolio? How do we educate the business on the today and the tomorrow? And how do we shift our investment between today and the tomorrow? So, and how you mentioned the portfolio quite a bit as well. So share a little bit on how companies, like especially product teams, a lot of times they don't really exposed to that term as often, right? So how do you run into sort of discussions as you educate your customers getting to where they need to be?
Yeah, sure. So I want to make a couple points, because you're right. So there are different kinds of companies that end up transitioning to needing a CPO. I kind of was talking about a life, like when I look at a life of a company when they start small and then they're growing. But there's another kind of company, and that is a company that has already matured out in market and has historically grown through we often find a marketing and sales led motion typically, and those kinds of companies where they may not have had a very strong product mindset or culture, and they realize what got them to where they are today is going to stay, like, keep them here and not where they want to be. That's another kind of company which also could benefit. It's okay. In that case, what they are transitioning is more than just adding a leader. It's transitioning a complete way of working and a complete way of they're operating completely differently when they are trying to transition into a more of a product-led type company. So specifically, what a lot of the clients that we work with that are going through that kind of transition, they need to almost start from the beginning of really even defining what a product is and then what a portfolio of products could be. And then it really depends on the organization. So it depends on what industry that the company is in, what makes sense in terms of how do they think about organizing their company around what value they deliver to clients, so to their customers. And the reason why I say that is that companies organize portfolios very differently, and they organize teams very differently, depending on whether or not they are thinking about value across a customer journey or value across, in some cases for digital companies, like a platform. So they could either take a slice from a customer journey or take a slice from a vertical that they are focused on. So it really ends up depending. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I think yes, for sure. So like you said, there are companies, there are different types of companies. So like they're growing, and then kind of grow into the level of complexity, you need a CPO. That's like organically happen. And then there are a lot more companies out there today that it's established, and they are, they call it a transition or transformation, right? They call it various terms of a transformation, digital or any transformation. In the end, is a product transformation. Because we all know our software is eating the world. Even not software, using software, you're still using the product management mindset to think about the long-term evaluation and involvement of product versus sort of like a project-based, right? So you go through either project to product transformation, digital transformation. In the end, it's all product transformation. You bring the product-led and product mindset into the organization, where CPOs a lot of times are taking on even broader sort of responsibility, in not just in, okay, I'm gonna run a product portfolio around product practice or portfolio practice. I also have to like help the entire organization to kind of think and operate differently. So I want to kind of dovetail that a little bit into some of the conversation we had yesterday. Like, you talk to a lot of customers, and we work with a lot of companies. And then as we kind of compare notes a little bit on what are some of the challenges that you saw patterns some of the challenges. Do you want to bring it up a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Becky. So we've been in business for a number of years, and we've been running engagements. So one of the things that we did recently was we took a look at the last decade of engagements that we ran, which included some kind of consulting work. We like to go into companies, understand what's going on with their culture and process. We run a whole diagnostic. And what we did was we took a look at what are the most common problems that almost every single company experiences. And it's remarkable how consistent it is. And a lot of it has to do with the basic building blocks of what it means to be a product manager to start. So there's three common things that we have, three common challenges that are consistent across various product teams that we've worked with. First one is a lack of or poorly defined roles and responsibilities. The second is that there is a missing link between where the business objectives are and what product is actually working on. So typically a missing strategy. And then the third one is stakeholders. So those are the three things that we often find. And I think they're really important for a CPO to understand, because if as a CEO, my CPO needs to understand where are the roadblocks to great product success, and they need to be very good at making sure that the foundational blocks around what is a product, what are product managers expected to do, is strong, and they have to also translate where is the business going, what strategy, what markets are we going after that are most important, what KPIs are most important for us this year, translating that into what the product team is actively working on, and then engaging the rest of the business around achieving those outcomes. So those three need to be there.
Right. And I think that's it's exactly what we have seen working with a lot of companies now, thousands of teams, on how product team can be successful. And you know, one of the quotes is that, you know, product team is probably one of the most collaborative function in the company, where you think about it, you know, engineer codes, design, and marketing, like product managers cannot deliver anything to the customers by themselves. So they have to working with the others. So that makes everything just a lot more complex in a way. So think about this, where, you know, you talk about sort of lack of a roles and responsibility that happens at the individual product manager level. It also is a CPO. How do you define the success of a CPO, right? Same thing for strategy. How can you get strategy buy-in with the business and also with their team? And then, you know, think about the number of stakeholders a CPO would have. You know, product managers, maybe you have some stakeholders, and CPO has the stakeholders all around, right? So your executive team, obviously your boss and the board, your not only just your cross-functional leaders, every single person on their team could go to CPO to have some sort of escalation. Obviously their team and engineering, like everything's so complicated. So, and then that really led to some of the questions. So just, you know, for some of you not familiar with the Dragonboat, and we work with the CPO a lot, right? One of the things that we say, you know, we are actually the purpose-built platform for CPOs and their teams. I want to put it for CPOs and their teams there, is because a lot of times people think about product management, they think about product managers. Obviously, product managers are the foundation of everything, but you can't do product management if you don't have, you know, product executives, product leaders, stakeholders of the product teams. So that's really dovetailed together into some of the questions you have. So one of the audience asked the question, right? How do you build trust?
Yeah.
How do you build trust? That is a very big word. How do you build trust with the CEO first? How do you build trust with your stakeholders? How do you build trust with your team? How do you build trust externally? So let's just double click on that. What has been your experience on that?
Sure. So ultimately, trust is built the same in any kind of relationship. It's you make sure that you're communicating what are the expectations, and then you're delivering according to those expectations. So that's like fundamentally, it's true in any kind of relationship. It's true in your personal relationships and your professional relationships. So the CEO and CPO relationship is hinging on what are the expectations of the product organization, and those need to be linked to the business objectives. So oftentimes when we come into an organization, I kind of mentioned it before, that there's a missing strategy piece and I've been in a room, by the way, Becky, where in hosting a workshop where we bring the executive leadership in the same room as the entire product team. This is wonderful, by the way. And we force the conversation around what are your actual business priorities. And this is sometimes the first time that product managers actually hear directly from executives what the business priorities are. And it's mind-blowing. So the reason why I bring that story up is because a CEO and CPO have to be in sync about the business priorities. And then what are the KPIs? What are the leading indicators that indicate that we are on the right track? I saw a question around like, how does the CEO and CPO work together in a way that not just building trust, but that the CPO then owns the roadmap and the strategy piece? Well, it's about it's that conversation that needs to happen where the roadmap, it should be a communication tool of what the strategy is. It's not, and by the way, I need to say this, it's not a release plan. Okay, a good CPO understands that, I think.
Right.
Yeah, you're laughing because
no, you might get me started. So I think the exercise you mentioned about CEO and CPO and the product manager sitting in the room about the business priority. It's a very interesting exercise. So throughout my career, I've done a lot of strategic plannings, and some of the companies I went in there to start the first strategic planning, I've never done that before in the format where, it's almost like a play poker, right? Get everyone in the room to say, hey, we commit to the board, we commit to investor, we commit to the, Wall Street, that here's what our goal would be. And we'd like to commit, we haven't committed yet, right? So we'd like to commit because we need to hit that trajectory for business reasons. And so let's say how we are going to do that. Previously, people in the room start talking, but the way we do it is almost like playing poker. So everyone was going to say, hey, you're going to answer that. And then we'll flip around to see what it is. There's never a time you see that our majority of the room have the same answer. They're all like, it's so fun. We should acquire a company. We should expand to this country. We should go partnership. We should build a new product line. They're so hugely different that it will be the eye opener a lot of times for the CEO to realize, no wonder you can get everyone aligned because you're just fundamentally misaligned at the very top level. So that was, I think to your point where, building trust and, not just with the CEO, also with your key stakeholders from, like your CROs and CMOs and CFOs, is to make sure at that level, everyone is at least aligned on what is the business strategy. How do we then translate into product strategy so that it can be used across the board?
Yeah, I like to say that if there's confusion at the top, there's going to be confusion at the bottom, right? So and that is why this exercise is so valuable. And you don't need us, by the way, for anybody listening, you don't need us in the room, but you need to force this conversation. And there's a couple ways that the CPO, a great CPO, knows how to have this conversation. They need to articulate. So they need to articulate it in the language of the other departments of why this is why having this conversation is going to be good for you, because it's like the same as an individual product manager needing to know the WIFM. This also happens on the executive level. And then the CEO, CPO, they should really, prior to this conversation, make sure that they are clear on, okay, what are really the business priorities and objectives that should rise to the top, with some flexibility of encouraging the other voices in the room to also have a say. If there is something better, they might need to get more information or to make a different decision. But not just having the conversation, making sure that the conversation costs something. So I know you mentioned playing poker. Okay, if you bring a whole bunch of executives into a room, everyone is going to have a little bit of some kind of preconceived thing that they want to get out of that conversation, right? They're going to have some bias for their department. I really don't like using this word politicking, but it exists in a lot of different kinds of organizations. And to get around that, you need to put cost behind decisions.
100%.
if you bring them into a room together, you can have the conversation, and suddenly the product team is going to have a list this long of business priorities. And once you have business priorities like this, you have no priorities. And then again, they cannot answer. So a great CPO knows that his team needs to be able to answer no, right? We say this a lot. You have to say no to things, but you have to say no to things in a way that is backed by the why. Like, why are you saying no? And a good strategy enables your teams to know what to say no to. And that is, again, that needs to happen at the top, because if it's not happening at the top, it's definitely not going to happen at the bottom.
Right. I 100% agree with you. So I think I want to just dovetail the conversation around a couple of things. One is to have a core strategic alignment before go to sort of broader team, because otherwise it will be a much more difficult conversation. And for some of you, it's been around for a while, you know, you need a kind of meeting before the meeting, right? So at least you kind of have a general idea to know how misaligned the others. And, you know, obviously as an external, if you're coming from external, you have a little bit more kind of openness, because that's perceived as sort of more neutral, right? So I think, you know, some of the you know, practice that we've seen so far is either you can bring in someone external. So that's sometimes it's very helpful, because you will have a voice of reasoning kind of guide the conversation. So there are a lot of companies that are, you know, help to do this sort of strategic offsites. And, you know, there are also another thing is if you want to stay this internal for various reasons, and then sort of the pre-alignment is really important, just so you have a general idea of the direction we want to go to. So I think that tactics, it can be helpful. And the other part I want to call out a little bit is, Rina, you mentioned it, is about the cost, right? So one of the key things that, you know, there's a reason we call it strategic planning. There's a strategic and there's planning. So as we start to have different ideas, obviously we're going to evaluate sort of like various lenses to look at it. Is sort of like a strategic versus sort of like a drive revenue. There are different categories of investment. And then we also want to look at the allocation across the board. So that's where CPO actually can really bring in the rigor of product portfolio management into these conversations, because everyone has a wish list, right? But then you would say, how do we rationalize this wish list so that we take bets in different types of bets, and sometimes just run a business, at the same time also understanding it's not gonna for us completely lose the long term, or if we look at only long term, then we would potentially be dead before we get there, right? So that CPO is so great to orchestrate the whole thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's this is hard. Okay, all of this is really hard. If you think it's going to be easy, it just absolutely is not, because you have to balance so many things, long term, short term. It's just when we come in, and that's something else, Becky. We never come in because somebody else in the business brought us in. It's usually somebody within, like a leader in product, because they need their voice augmented in their organization. They already know something is wrong and something could be better. It's they sometimes need to augment their voice, because again, these conversations need to happen. But I did want to also ask you, because another common problem for a lot of product leaders is not having access to great data. So they might have data, but it might live in different pockets of the organization, and then consolidating it, bringing it together is also a challenge for them. So when they're having these conversations, obviously they want to come super informed. Have you solved for this data problem, data gathering, data management, and data communication?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think there are a couple of things to think about it, where CPO operate on a number of data, right? So they need to understand the business data. They need to understand the customer. They need to obviously understand what it takes to build product. And they also have to understand the product performance. Like, but that's in some ways, that's where Dragonboat started, is that there's no tool for all the system into place. Sure, you can go to Jira, you can see engineering delivery, but when it's done, it's done. There's no look back. When you think about it, you have a product portfolio, which means the product itself should be the center of the universe. You say, how does the product connect to customers? And did they use it? Did they pay? Are they good customers? And how does the product connect to business, right? Did you drive the revenue, or you drive the conversion, you drive the business results you need? And then how much it costs to build the product. So, when you do strategic planning, t-shirt sizing, fingers in the air, so it's gonna be, medium, large. And did it really, medium, large is 10x of that. And all that stuff, it's, obviously you're going to spend some time gathering together. So then you can start to have that centralized, that you understand, how so a lot of times we work with a lot of companies actually have they just brought in a new CPO, and a new CPO would have a hard time to say, I don't even know the lay of land, how we're doing, what product is performing. Then you have to spend a lot of time to get up to speed, right? So then when you have a platform, you start to say, okay, now we're going to plug in the data. I can see, here's the things we have. Here's the performance of the data. Here's where we want to go. Here's what has been costed historically. And then boom, you have a foundation to get started. Then from there, you have to empower the rest of your team, because CPO doesn't just bring in, okay, I'm the sort of the double of the CEO, just take the part of the CEO. CPO would have to bring in a real product leadership skills that embodied by themselves and also take along their team, right? Everyone on the team should think about like a mini CPO, right? To say, okay, now they have a strategy. How does it connect to my areas of strategy that my area should support the broader strategy, and how I should think about my products driving business outcome? So kind of longer answer to your question, but to your point, where first you have to establish a taxonomy of data, which should cover your product and your product portfolio, and the lenses look at your product in terms of customers, in terms of your outcome, in terms of what take it to build, and so forth. And then you have to think about how that you can use the taxonomy to your team, so your team can start to manage their product as a product versus a project. Or roadmap is a snapshot of point in time, say, this is what I want to do. It's only telling you what I want to do. It doesn't tell you why, doesn't tell you what are the other things I thought about I'm not going to do, and here's the reason. Didn't talk about how this product has performed since I released or launched or whatnot, right? So, and didn't talk about what is my product development process. And we can talk more about that, because I think this is something I think we both are very passionate about, that, right? You can't build a product by one person. So having that data taxonomy is great, it's important. And then you have that the individual teams take ownership of this data that would create this broader data. I think about Salesforce and all that stuff, right? So you create this broader data system where everyone can act on it. So transparency, visibility, and alignment all gonna be facilitated by something like that, right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, yes. So data lives in a lot of different ways at different companies, and great CPOs know that they need specific data to make decisions. I actually think that great businesses get three things really right. They understand, and I like to always kind of keep it simple with three things, but they understand first, what value are they providing to their customers, right? So their value proposition is really strong. And the next is their operating model, how they actually provide the value to create profit in the organization, also really strong. And the last one, which is kind of what you're, I think, talking about, is they have a learning model. So they understand how to run experiments, how to get feedback, and how to continuously improve internally to get the other two things really, really done really well. And you can't do learning without having a strong architecture by which you learn. So you have to put that thought in beforehand. So I like to, when we work with different product teams, I think tools are extremely valuable. And you know this as well as I do, they're only as valuable as the work and thought you put into making them a strategic asset. So a tool should be able to kind of 10x your ability to communicate strategy, and it should also 10x your ability to learn. So if you're not tooling your tool correctly, if you're not getting that ROI from the tool, you haven't put the thought in before applying it and adopting it in an organization. You know what I'm trying to kind of lead here? Yeah.
Exactly. It's like a scissor, right? So you can't have only one blade, right? It just doesn't work. And it has to have two places. One is to the practice and the thoughts and the people to be able to carry it on. The other one is enable the practice and thoughts.
Exactly.
So one of the things you call out, and I think is really important, is a lot of, kind of we talked about yesterday, is around how product management, a lot of times people say, okay, I need to train my product team. I'm going to bring, training a consultant. I kind of teach product management, how to do product management. I say, wait, it's not enough, right? A lot of times product managers knows how to do their job. It's the broader ecosystem. So tell a little bit about how you see, you kind of brought on 3 challenges. So how do you see companies kind of overcome those challenges?
Yeah, we do try to drink our own champagne at 280 Group. And so when we've identified, okay, very common roles and responsibilities, strategy, and the stakeholder alignment piece are important. And again, they're really important for the CPO to solve. We're, again, a partner also to the CPO. We're a partner to product teams. And the way that you go about solving this, it's not just training. By the way, I don't like calling us a training organization. I like the idea of an education organization, but we're trying to move product teams up the maturity curve and become exceptional versions of themselves. And so that requires not just skills, which is what training historically accounts for. It accounts for culture and process. So you need to not just define what a product manager is expected to do and then teach them how to do it really well. Because I agree with you, a lot of individual product managers, if you tell them what's expected, they will learn how to do that job really well. But it's in the ecosystem is also important. It's how do you move a product through its life cycle at your organization? What decisions need to be made, not just by product team, but also by all the other departments. So it's a team. It really is a team sport, and knowing how to engage the rest of the department. I think all product teams should look to the CPO and the CEO to make sure that, again, there's no confusion at the top. So they're operating without confusion at the bottom.
Right. And then I think that one of the things I really want to also double click on that is we have seen sometimes the product teams struggle on 2 sort of aspects. One part is sort of the strategy side, product strategy, product sense itself, like what should we build, how the user experience will be. The other part is very interesting, is that the product team delivery. And when people overemphasize on strategy, a lot of times there's a gap in delivery. So then it creates a lot of challenges in credibility and trust. Imagine you go talk to your stakeholders, say, we're going to have these features, going to do launches, and then they couldn't. So then, because a lot of times you also know a product is never built by one team, you don't have a control on your own thing, right? You have a lot of dependencies on others. And, so then that forced product manager became like a delivery manager or project manager, because if you don't deliver, they fail. Or sometimes they are so become pulled into strategic parts. So how do you see some of the feedback and experience you've seen in your...
Becky, I could talk about this one for hours because, okay, I want to unpack a couple things here. First, if a product manager launches the thing on time that they said they were going to launch, they often get promoted because, again, it's exactly what you said. You said you were going to do something and then you did it, and therefore I trust you that you're going to do your job. But the biggest question is, if the product manager did do it on time, what didn't they do? And did the thing that they launched, did that produce the change that the business was trying to invest in? So they need to, so this is the piece, this is the conversation that I think is missing in a lot of organizations, is how do you actually make a product team truly strategic? So you said that product managers have more issues on the delivery side. I actually, I see it the other way. It's that the strategy is not there. And so they end up defaulting to just delivering things, because delivering things, it's easy to point to as you've checked the box and you did something and therefore it's valuable, but it's not necessarily valuable. Like, that has to be quantified.
Right.
And it's quantified by what are the product behaviors. So what are the behaviors that you're trying to change and affect change for your customer? And then what are the business objectives that adding this has then helped you achieve? And having those links is really where I think a lot of product teams struggle. And then they
Right.
if you end up in this, I'm just going to end up building things mode, which we call, feature factory mode,
Right.
then you're going to be at the whim of the next person that walked into your office because they're going to have an idea. Everybody, how many ideas are floating around in an organization?
100%. I think
Hundreds.
sort of going back what we kind of started earlier around how the short-term, more immediate needs will almost always trump longer-term needs, right? So for product manager, sometimes when everyone's focused on delivery, then that part is missing. Just like when a CPO get brought on board, when people think about delivery next quarter, this quarter, that's also the strength driving to that. So I think it's great to think about where sort of really going back to the roles and responsibilities, right? When the product managers only quote unquote measured by what they deliver, then there's a strong focus there. But if product managers are measured by the outcome they sign up for and they deliver at the ROI they're supposed to be, right? If you two product managers both supposed to drive, let's convert it by 10%, one use 10x the resources versus the other, that's no brainer, right? So these are the things that conversations start to happen in companies. And hopefully, I think we're running out of time a little bit today, but
There's some good questions here, though.
yeah. I think we should probably do a follow-up on that.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I do want to make sure that, okay, so since we're doing wrap up, I do want to make sure that the audience here leaves with some concrete ideas and tips. So I hope you heard from us today that this role is hard. And my advice to all product leaders, but also people who are aspiring to be in the CPO seat and position, a lot of it has to do with making sure that you're having the right conversations and that you're bringing data into those conversations. So there was a question around like, how do you know what's valuable to build? You have to talk to your market and you have to make a decision around how are you going to cut. So we call it like tiny acts of discovery. How are you going to become a really great learning organization where you can, before you build the big thing, you can validate that it is valuable earlier in the process. And there's a number of different experiments you can run, a number of different ways that you can get really smart about this, but you need to, there's no shortcut. I'm just going to say it, there's no shortcut. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of really strong leadership and conversations that need to happen to make it happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Well, first of all, I think it's important to think that there is a structure. There's a way to be successful. So at least you can go follow that structure. And then there's also practice and learning and improvement. And luckily for Rina and for some of you know, that Dragonboat has a very extensive CPO resources as well. In fact, this is called a CPO series and for product leaders and their teams. So feel free to finding more resources, contact with Rina, 280 Group. It's a great organization in thinking product management beyond just product managers. So I definitely highly recommend to reach out, find out more information. And if you're a product leader and you are growing into your role, or you don't have a CPO yet, but you're trying to see how CPO think and work and be successful, and check out Dragonboat as well. So with that, I'm going to conclude. There are a lot of questions. We can probably do a follow-up session or follow up separately on social. And thanks, Rina. And thanks to everyone. We'll be in touch next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.